Every dangerous motorcycles list you've ever seen talks about speed and crashes. But nobody tells you about the ones stupid fast that made governments actually do something about it. At some point, engineers stopped asking how fast can we build this, and governments just started answering that question for them. For these 15 motorcycles, that answer came in the form of a recall notice, an import ban, or a diplomatic meeting between countries, and the last one on this list triggered all three. Stick around, because that story is genuinely insane. Number 15. Triumph TF250X. Triumph spent about 60 years carefully building one of the most prestigious names in motorcycling. Classic styling, British heritage, the whole thing. Then in 2025, before the race season even started, the Consumer Product Safety Commission sent them a recall notice. 249cc single-cylinder, 26 claimed horsepower, 220 pounds, $8,995. This was Triumph's big return to factory motocross racing, their first serious off-road competition entry in decades. The recall came before a single race. The filing documents the specific injury hazard and the unit count, and neither is flattering. But the timing is what makes this one sting. Triumph builds its entire brand identity on credibility and craftsmanship, and the first official response to their comeback was a federal safety notice. A lesser brand takes a hit and moves on. For Triumph, whose whole pitch is that they do things properly, a government recall before the season opener is not just a safety issue. It is a statement about how the comeback started. Not with a podium, with paperwork telling customers something was wrong. Coming in at number 14, Honda CBR 600RR and CBR 1000RR. The CBR nameplate is Honda's most iconic sport line. Riders have been putting these things on pedestals since the 90s, and Honda has spent decades earning that reputation. The CBR 1000RR Fireblade runs a 999cc inline-4, makes 214 claimed horsepower, weighs 443 pounds wet, and costs $28,500. The fuel pump impeller had a failure risk. Not a degraded performance kind of failure. The engine cuts out, at speed. That phrase does a lot of work. Engine cuts out at speed on a 214 horsepower motorcycle is not a minor inconvenience. There is no gradual slowdown. Power delivery stops. Whatever the bike was doing at that moment is now whatever the laws of physics decide. The CBR 600RR is on the same recall for the same reason. Different displacement, identical problem. Honda put two of their most trusted names on one federal recall document under the same failure mode. The specific model years are documented in the filing. What is not in the filing is any explanation for how this passed production sign-off in the first place. At number 13, no single bike, no individual recall, just an entire engine category that governments across the world have been systematically eliminating for 50 years. California banned two-stroke street registration under CARB regulations. Not a guideline, a hard regulatory stop. More than 160 cities in China followed with bans that effectively ended the two-stroke street bike in the world's largest motorcycle market. Hanoi announced its ban takes effect in 2030. Two bikes higher on this list are two-strokes. Both banned or restricted, both for the same core reason. An engine design that produces extraordinary power relative to its displacement with emissions that no regulatory framework decided were acceptable to keep around. Governments stopped drawing lines around individual bikes and started drawing lines around the technology itself. That is a specific kind of institutional response. It means the problem was not a rogue engineer at one company, or one model that slipped through approval. It means an entire class of machines kept producing the same result, and regulators eventually stopped treating it as a case-by-case situation. Every two-stroke on this list was already living on borrowed time. The bans on individual bikes were just the moment the clock ran out. Number 12. Vincent Black Shadow. In 1948, 150 miles per hour was not a number associated with anything road legal. Fighter planes, maybe. A motorcycle you could buy and ride to work? No. The Vincent Black Shadow did 150 miles per hour in production form, which is the kind of detail that makes you understand why this bike still gets talked about 70 years later. 998cc V-twin, 55 horsepower, 458 pounds dry. Production ended in 1955, not because the government banned it, but because the company ran out of money building something this far ahead of everything else. What makes this one interesting is not what happened to the bike. It is what the bike forced regulators to confront. British roads in the late 1940s had no framework for a machine capable of this. No speed legislation that anticipated it. No safety standards that addressed it. The Vincent did not get banned because there were not enough of them to make that conversation urgent. But every speed restriction discussion that followed in Britain happened after someone already proved 150 miles per hour on a public road was possible. The Black Shadow did not get stopped. It just left the rulebook standing in the road behind it. At number 11, Harley-Davidson. The entire brand is built around one idea: freedom. Open road, no restrictions, American independence on two wheels. That is not an accident. That is the marketing, the culture, and the product all at once. In 2016, the federal government made them recall 250,000 motorcycles. The affected models ran from 2008 through 2011, covering touring and CVO bikes. Launch prices ranged from $16,000 up past $30,000 depending on the model. These were not entry-level machines. These were the flagship Harleys, the ones people bought specifically because of what the brand represented. The defect was the rear brake master cylinder, which could quit entirely mid-ride with zero warning, taking the rear brake with it while the bike was still moving at speed. 250,000 units, one of the largest motorcycle recalls in American history. The government told the most American motorcycle company on earth to take 250,000 of their bikes back and fix them. There is a version of this story where the irony writes itself and you leave it alone. The brand that sells freedom, forced by a federal agency to admit that 250,000 of its bikes could not reliably stop. That version is the correct one. Next up, Suzuki TL1000S. The pitch was straightforward. Ducati's 916 was the benchmark V-twin superbike of the era, and it cost around $16,000. Suzuki figured they could build something comparable for $8,299 and take that market. 996cc V-twin, 125 claimed horsepower, 429 pounds wet. Period tested at 3.1 seconds to 60 and 10.8 seconds in the quarter mile. The rotary rear damper was the engineering gamble. The idea was smoother, more progressive suspension response than a conventional shock. On paper, it was an interesting solution. On a racetrack, under hard cornering loads, it faded. The damper lost resistance progressively until the rear suspension went soft mid-corner, on a 125 horsepower bike with a power curve that had no patience for soft suspension. Suzuki issued a voluntary recall on 1997 and 1998 models. The fix was a steering damper retrofit to reduce the handlebar instability that the suspension failure was causing. Period Press noted the improvement. They also noted that the rotary damper was still there. The root cause was still there. Suzuki had installed a device to make the failure feel less catastrophic while leaving the failure in place. Coming in at number 9, Yamaha RZ500. Yamaha built a Grand Prix motorcycle, scaled it down to 500cc, gave it 4 cylinders arranged in a V, made it street legal, and then sold it to civilians. 88 claimed horsepower, 390 pounds wet, period tested quarter mile of 12.3 seconds. That is factory GP engineering with a license plate bracket bolted on. The US government did not ban it by name. They did not have to. EPA two-stroke emissions regulations made it impossible to certify for American sale, and Yamaha pulled it rather than fight a standard their engine physically could not meet. The calculation was straightforward. Sacrifice the RZ500 and protect the rest of the lineup that actually moved volume. So Yamaha sold it in Canada. 5,999 Canadian dollars in 1984, perfectly legal 45 minutes north of the border. American riders read about it in Motorcyclist magazine. Some drove to Canada and bought one. Most did not. The RZ350 got the same treatment for the same reason, which tells you this was not a one-time miscalculation on Yamaha's part. It was a pattern. Build the most exciting motorcycle you can, discover that the EPA disagrees with your life choices, and find a different country to sell it in. Number 8. Bimota V-Due. In 1997, Bimota charged $20,000 for a 500cc motorcycle with carbon fiber construction and 90 claimed horsepower, which was their way of saying they had figured out the future of the internal combustion engine, and you could own it for the price of a decent car. The direct injection system did not work. The engine seized, ran inconsistently, or refused to start entirely. And of the 388 units built, only 150 were delivered before Bimota recalled every single one. All 150, back to the factory. The 90 claimed horsepower was a launch figure. Real-world output on any given day was whatever the injection system decided to produce, which was frequently nothing consistent enough to test against. Period press could not run standard performance numbers because the engine would not perform consistently enough to generate them. Bimota filed for bankruptcy in 2001. The V-Due recall is the documented primary reason. A company bet its survival on technology that was not ready, charged $20,000 for it, got it all back, and closed inside 4 years. Sliding in at number 7, Honda CBR 1100XX Super Blackbird. You are a Honda engineer in 1996 and you have just built the fastest production motorcycle on Earth. 178 miles per hour confirmed. The press loves it. The record is yours, and for 3 years nobody comes close. Then a guy walks into a Suzuki dealership in 1999, pays $9,999, and rides home on something doing 194 miles per hour. Your record is gone, and so is your entire marketing campaign. 1,137 cc, 164 claimed horsepower, 562 pounds wet, period tested at 2.7 seconds to 60 and 10.5 in the quarter mile. Numbers that were untouchable until they suddenly were not. European regulators watched the whole thing and decided both manufacturers had gone far enough. The speed cap agreement that followed limited every production superbike above the performance threshold to 186 miles per hour. Both manufacturers took the limiter. The Blackbird started the race that governments eventually decided to finish for everyone. Number 6. Ducati Panigale V4. At $21,995, with 1,103 cc, 214 claimed horsepower, 436 pounds wet, and a quarter-mile time of 10.1 seconds, the Panigale V4 is Ducati's definitive statement about what an Italian superbike can do. The federal government has opened multiple recall campaigns on it, and 2 of them need to be understood as separate events because treating them as one thing makes the situation sound more manageable than it actually is. The first recall was for rear axle structural failure. The component responsible for keeping the rear wheel attached to the motorcycle had a documented failure risk. On a motorcycle capable of 10.1 seconds in the quarter mile, a rear axle with a structural failure risk is not a minor footnote. The second was a completely separate campaign for the rear brake hose, which routes close to the exhaust. Heat from the exhaust could degrade the hose and cause brake fluid loss, which means rear brake failure while the bike is in motion. The rear axle and the rear brake hose are unrelated systems. Ducati's flagship superbike did not have one critical component recalled. It had 2, for different reasons, in different campaigns. $21,995. At number 5, the only motorcycle on this list that was never recalled, never restricted, and never formally banned by anyone. That is not because it was safe. It is because no government agency could figure out what category to put it in. The MTT Y2K runs a Rolls-Royce Allison 250 turbine engine, an actual aircraft turbine in a motorcycle chassis, 320 horsepower from MTT's own spec sheet, 500 pounds, around $185,000, and a claimed 0 to 60 under 3 seconds with no independent period test available to confirm it. Most U.S. states refused registration. The reason was bureaucratic rather than legislative. Standard DMV motorcycle classification is built around internal combustion displacement measured in cubic centimeters. A Rolls-Royce aircraft turbine does not have a cubic centimeter figure. The forms did not have a box for it. Nobody sat in a room and decided to ban this motorcycle. The regulatory infrastructure simply did not know what it was, so it defaulted to no. A ban would at least mean someone looked at the Y2K and made a decision. What it actually got was a shrug from every DMV window in the country, which in practical terms produces the same result and is somehow more embarrassing for everyone involved. Number 4. Kawasaki Ninja ZX-6R, 2024. 636 cc, 130 claimed horsepower, 423 pounds wet, $11,699, quarter mile in 10.9 seconds. A sports bike that does everything a sports bike is supposed to do, which makes what happened in 2024 worth paying attention to. The government issued a Do Not Ride designation covering 17,000 units. Standard recall language tells owners to stop using a product until a dealer applies a fix. Do not ride is a different classification. It means the risk is immediate enough that any use of the vehicle is unacceptable until the defect is corrected. The language is specific, it is rare, and 17,000 people received it in the mail about a motorcycle they had recently purchased and were presumably enjoying. The issue was the crankcase bolt, which had a failure risk that could result in components detaching from the engine while the motorcycle was in use. On a 130 horsepower sports bike running a 10.9-second quarter mile, a crankcase component coming loose is not a problem that resolves itself gracefully. For $11,699 and 17,000 letters, the federal government reduced the ownership experience to 3 words: do not ride. Coming in at number 3, Kawasaki Ninja H2, 998cc supercharged inline-4, 200 horsepower at ram air, 524 pounds wet, $25,000. Period tested quarter mile of 10.0 seconds at 150 miles per hour. Kawasaki certified it as street legal in all markets. You can register it, insure it, and ride it to the shops if you choose. The owner documentation and press materials from Kawasaki explicitly caution against using it on public roads. The H2 is designed for track use, that is in the manual. So Kawasaki built a motorcycle they believed should not be ridden on public roads, put it through every legal certification required for road use, sold it at $25,000, and included documentation advising buyers not to use it in the context where it is legally permitted to be used. No regulator stopped them because no regulation required them to stop. The H2 met every legal standard for road certification and simultaneously came with a note from the people who built it, suggesting you ignore the legal certification. 10 seconds in the quarter mile at 150 miles per hour, probably best on a track. Kawasaki sold you the bike anyway. Number 2. Kawasaki H2 750 Mach 4. Riders called it the Widowmaker. That name did not come from a marketing department or a magazine headline. It came from the people who wrote it, understood what it actually was, and arrived at the same word independently. 748cc two-stroke triple, period tested at 74 horsepower by Cycle World in 1972, 428 pounds wet, $1,495 at launch. Period tested 3.9 seconds to 60 and 12.6 seconds in the quarter mile at 105 miles per hour. The engine was built for a chassis that was not designed to contain it. The brakes were drums, which was standard for the era and insufficient for this power plant at speed. The frame flexed under hard acceleration. The front end became unpredictable in ways that period press documented specifically. The two-stroke power delivery arrived faster than the chassis could organize itself to respond. By 1973, U.S. insurance companies had stopped writing policies on it. The actuarial judgment was that the risk could not be priced, so the answer became no coverage. There was no formal ban, no government recall, no legislation. The market simply closed around it. Insurance companies did what no regulator had managed. And for $1,495 at launch, the Widowmaker earned its name before anyone in an official building had the time to do anything about it. And at number 1, the Suzuki Hayabusa. This is the one that triggered all 3. In 1999, Suzuki launched a motorcycle that period tested at 194 miles per hour, 1,299 cc, 173 claimed horsepower, 474 pounds wet, $9,999. Cycle World ran it in 2000 and posted a quarter mile of 10.3 seconds at 143 miles per hour. Under $10,000 for a motorcycle capable of 194 miles per hour in production form, available to anyone who could walk into a dealership. French regulators noticed. German regulators noticed. The ACEM, which represents European automobile and motorcycle manufacturers, began coordinating conversations between manufacturers and government bodies across the continent. The threat was explicit and documented. If manufacturers did not voluntarily limit production motorcycle top speeds, European governments would ban the import of Japanese superbikes from the continent. Not one model, not one manufacturer, all of them, because of one motorcycle. In 2000, manufacturers from competing companies sat down together, under that documented threat, and agreed to a voluntary speed cap, 186 miles per hour, on every production superbike above the performance threshold. Electronic limiters across the category. The Hayabusa that came after 2001 was limited. slower than the one that started the conversation. That would have been enough for any other entry on this list. An international agreement negotiated between competitors because a government's threat was credible enough that neither side was willing to test it. A recall notice equivalent, except the recall applied to an entire category of motorcycle across an entire industry. Then 2019 happened. The Hayabusa was pulled from European sale entirely for Euro 4 emissions non-compliance. The motorcycle that had survived political pressure, international negotiations, and a decade of electronic limitation was finally stopped by an emissions test. It came back in 2021, Euro 5 compliant, third generation, different engine. But between 1999 and 2001, there was a version running at 194 miles per hour with no limiter, street legal, under $10,000, already in garages before the agreement was signed. That generation did not get stopped, it just got replaced by one that was already slower before it left the factory. A recall notice, an import ban, and a diplomatic meeting between countries. That is 15 motorcycles that each forced someone with actual authority to respond. Starting from a safety notice nobody wanted to write, and ending with the diplomatic incident that changed how the entire industry builds superbikes. The most dangerous motorcycle you have ever ridden, drop it in the comments. If it is on this list, even better. Send this to someone who thinks they want a dangerous bike. Let them watch first.